Since the time of Joseph, the Hebrews were in bondage for 400 years. Well, they were in Egypt for 400 years. They weren't always in bondage, but they were in Egypt for 400 years. And over that amount of time, they got used to the life in Egypt. Egypt had a lot of gods and a lot of idols. Think of things that we've gotten used to here that we really shouldn't be tolerant of, but we've got to become pretty tolerant, pretty complacent of certain things in our lives just because it's the norm, so to say. And, it's easy to do. And so for 400 years, they've gotten really comfortable in the life of Egypt. So when God answers their cries and brings them out of Egypt, Moses, carries them through the Red Sea, over to the Sinai Peninsula. And once they get kind of settled there, God sort of reintroduces himself to them. It's like, hi, I am the Lord thy God. And then he gives them 4 points on how to interact with him. You'll have one God, I'm it. Not dozens and dozens of them like you had in Egypt. One God. No idols. You're not going to bow to anything or anybody except me. No idols. You won't use my name in vain, and you'll remember to take a day off and worship me. So he gives them 4 points how he expects to be treated. And then he goes on and he gives them 6 points on how to live with each other in peace and harmony. You will not you will honor your parents. You will not spill innocent blood. You won't commit adultery. You won't steal. You won't lie. And you won't covet what your neighbors have. 6 morality clauses, you could say, on how to live with each other. Now fast forward about 1,500 years, Jesus is now on the earth, and he says there's 2 commandments. Did he repeal the 10? Does it affect the 10 that are in place? No, because when you think about it, what were his commandments? 1, you shall love the Lord thy God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. Okay, let's think of what God said. You'll have no other God. You'll worship no idols. You won't use my name in vain. And you'll take a day off and worship me. Well, if you love the Lord thy God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, won't you be, he'll be your only God? You're not going to worship anything else. You're not going to curse him. And you will worship him. That's right. So, isn't it really the 1? Isn't it really the 4? Just wrapped up in one ball? Yeah. And then he says the second one is like it. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, the 6 morality commandments, aren't those the same thing? Because if you love yourself, you're not going to steal from yourself. You're not going to murder yourself. You're not going to lie to yourself. Although sometimes you might when you're looking in here and you say, this outfit looks good. But in reality, no. So again, he hasn't changed anything. He's just taken 6 of them and packed it down into one statement. So here we are now at commandment number 8. Exodus 20:15. Thou shalt not steal. I haven't checked this, but I have a feeling this is probably like the second shortest verse in the Bible. How do you take 4 simple, small words and turn this into a whole sermon? I should be able to just tell you, look, if it doesn't belong to you, and it belongs to someone else, and you're not in the process of buying it, leave it alone, it ain't yours. And it's yours. Let's bow our heads and pray. Shouldn't it be that simple? But then you stop and you start asking the questions. Okay, the what, the who, the how, the why, the where. And all of a sudden, all kinds of things start coming into play. How do you steal? Why do you steal? What should you steal? What should you not steal? So you start looking at all this stuff, and it changes everything. And it's not just 4 simple little words. So I realize that the first sin recorded in the Bible is theft. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, well, it was disobedience. No, I can make an argument that it's theft. Because you see, Genesis 3 starts out, in the first verse, Genesis 3 starts out telling you about a story about a nice young couple that's very used to taking their walks in the garden, and one day they're taking their walk through their lush garden when a dark character comes out of the shadows and begins a conversation. Now, it doesn't record a mugging or a robbery. There's no physical assault. You know, let's make it, the definition of a robbery is that there was physical harm. So there wasn't a mugging, there wasn't a robbery. But he used a very nifty little tool that he still uses today all the time. It's called deception. And he went in and he swindled them. He hustled them. He took their most prized possession. What was their most prized possession? The abiding presence of their Creator. Yeah, you know, Eve did disobey and took a bite. But he swindled, he stole from her. And as a bonus, he walked away actually with another possession of theirs, their innocence. You see, the last verse of chapter 2 says, they were naked and they were not ashamed. Now, at the very end of this story, it's recorded, they were naked and they were afraid, they hid, they were ashamed. So what changed? They lost their innocence. Well, actually, they didn't lose it, it was stolen from them. And isn't that what the enemy comes to do? John 10:10 says the enemy comes to what? Steal, kill, and destroy. What's the first thing he does? Steal. What's the first thing he did here? Steal. Dennis Prager makes an argument that if you only obey one commandment, this is the one, because it encompasses every other commandment. You wonder, well, how is that? Let's take a look at them. If you put anything before God, you're stealing his position. If you bow to an idol, you're stealing his uniqueness. Disrespect his name, you steal his holiness. Fail to worship him, you're stealing the worship due him. If you dishonor your parents, you steal the authority and the respect from the generations that came before you. If you murder, you steal a life. And also you're going to steal somebody's happiness and joy. Adultery, you're stealing someone's spouse. Bear false witness or lie, you steal justice, you steal reputation, and you steal dignity. And covet, well, you're planning to steal what others have. So if you obeyed this one commandment, by default, wouldn't you have to obey the other 9? Or you could turn it around. If you break one of those other 9, have you broken this one? This command is unique in another way. It's open-ended. God never said what not to steal. The other ones are all specific. Number 5 is children, obey your parents. It's to the children to obey. 7 is to married people. Don't commit adultery. 2 single people can't commit adultery. But this one doesn't even give you a hint. So therefore you have to take a position that it's any and everything, tangible and intangible. Don't take it. Don't mess with it. So what are some of the things that people steal? First off, and I think this is the most serious form of theft, because God put forth a plan of redemption. If you steal an ox, you repay him with 5 oxes. If you steal a lamb, you repay them with 4 lambs. I'm thinking about that. Well, where the sheep? The other things is 7 times. Or you give a guilt offering to the priest. So there's a plan to redeem yourself if you steal. But this one, there's no plan of redemption. And that's a person kidnapped, forced slave, as we call it today, human trafficking. There is no plan of redemption. In fact, Exodus 21:16 says if you steal a person, you must die. It's pretty serious about that. What are the other things people steal? Personal property. Land, animals, cars, jewelry, money. Every day, 22,000 thefts are reported in the United States. But that's really just a drop in the bucket. Most thefts aren't reported. Most thefts are committed by family and friends, and we don't turn them in. And of course, it's not just people who steal. Industry steals, governments steal, totalitarian regimes steal personal property rights. In the 19th century, the rise of socialism in Europe caused property to be stolen and redistributed, which led then to the theft of freedom and the theft of life. Companies steal from you by false advertising, false promises, shoddy products, shoddy services. You know, advertising makes promises of things that just aren't so. Products that you buy, it looks great, but you open it up and it just falls apart right out of the box. Service people who come to you and maybe your dishwasher has a bad micro switch on the door, and they tell you it's a control panel. That's $300, not a $3 micro switch. Dishonest scales. Think of any place you go, the grocery store, the gas station, anything that measures product, whether it's a scale at the grocery store or the gas pump has a seal on it that says it's been inspected by the state and it is accurate. If you ever go into a gas station and you see a yellow piece of plastic over the nozzle and a lock through it, it means it failed the state's inspection. It wasn't accurate. They were cheating you. So I happened to run across this humorous picture. This is actually the cover picture that was on the October 3rd, 1936 Saturday Evening Post. Now, just looking at them, I would not be concerned about them breaking into my house, stealing my wallet, doing anything of that. If I called them thieves, they would become very indignant, I'm sure. Yet, look at them. They're obviously not bothered with a little bit of deception in their favor. So, the bottom line is, they're still stealing. Both of them are stealing. So, what are some other kind of subtle thefts that occur that we might not even think of as being thefts? How about withholding a payment when it's due? Is that theft? You promise to pay a company on a certain date and they're expecting it, and they need that money to pay because they pay their employees or they have their products that they have to pay, and if you withhold it from them, now they have higher holding costs. So you've stolen their profit. How about borrowing something and not returning it? Even not meaning it, not intentionally stealing it, but you borrow tools, books, whatever it is, and you just forget about it. You're done, you set it aside, and it just sits there collecting dust. That's theft. Or how about you owe Uncle Ted $500 and he hasn't paid you back, and when you ask him about it, he said, I'm sorry, but I really can't afford it right now. And then you notice that he's got the new iPhone 11 that just came out 2 days ago. It's in his hand. And so you didn't even know there was an iPhone 11. And it's in his hands. It's like, wait, how does that make you feel? Dave Ramsey puts it this way. He says it's going to make your Thanksgiving dinner taste different. So third, non-material things. A reputation. Can you steal a reputation?
Yes.
Gossip, libel, slander. You ruin somebody's good name, it's very hard for them to repair it. Can you ruin God's reputation? Can you steal God's reputation? You hear people sometimes say, I don't see any way out. Christians, there's no way that, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't, I'll never get out of this situation. Well, wait a minute. My God is able to take care of all situations.
Amen. Amen.
So if you're saying right there that God's not able, haven't you just stolen his reputation? Because he is able.
Amen.
Their dignity, humiliation. Humiliate a person, especially in public or in front of somebody, people that they love. It's very damaging. It can cause their heart to grow cold, them to build walls to separate so they don't get hurt again. Their trust, deception, trickery, You can be tricked into buying a used car that's really just a lemon, or a house that's a money pit by an unscrupulous salesperson. How about the person that gets tricked into a relationship or marriage by false professions of love, just so a person can get it to their belongings? You know, you hear about that, especially on the internet now, that's a big thing, that people have false professions and they end up stealing their bank accounts, stealing their property, stealing their homes, whatever, to get the people separated from their families for the sole purpose of just taking what they have. You know, when I think about it, Judas Iscariot falls into this category. Now, he didn't trick Jesus. He didn't fool Jesus. But the other 11 had no idea. They didn't see it coming. He tricked them. Intellectual property. That could be just sharing music or movies, things that so many people do. Not a big deal. You know, that FBI warning that comes up in front of every movie that says, don't make a copy. You know, well, if you do, that's stealing. How about taking credit for somebody else's idea? You know, Sally's talking to Bob and puts out a big plan that's going to save the company millions of dollars. And so at the next board meeting, Bob goes, hey, boss, I got this idea. And the boss says, Bob, you're brilliant. You get the corner office. And Sally's there picking her jaw off the ground. What? Hey, wait a minute, that's my idea. How about identity theft? Identity theft, 2005, 1.5 million Americans had their identity stolen. 2016, 15.4 million. Or the public official who takes a bribe, sells his vote, his decision, well, he's stealing your future and what's important to you, because he doesn't care about it. All he cares about is the money. Stealing is a form of hate. It's in direct contrast to God's love. The Apostle Paul says that if you truly love someone, you could never steal from them, because true love does no harm to that person. So I want to take a look here at the parable of the Good Samaritan. The story begins at Luke, the 10th chapter, the 30th verse. And there are three distinct attitudes that I want to pull out of the story that probably most people don't think about or miss when they read it. So, a certain man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers. And they stripped him, and they beat him, and went off, leaving him half dead. Okay, so the first attitude is this: it belongs to the robber. What is yours, I want, and I'm going to take it. It's the same attitude of a businessman who has his expense account, or a consumer who buys something on credit with no intention of ever paying it. Or the student who looks over another student's shoulder on a test, says, you studied hard for your grades, but I want them, I'm going to take them. Then the story continues, and by chance, a certain priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side, and likewise a Levite also. When he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. The second attitude is illustrated by these two men. What's mine is mine, and I'm going to keep it. You can steal by doing nothing. A person who is capable and able to work but chooses to live off the government is a thief. The person who fails to give a day's work for a day's pay is a thief. If we allow inequality and injustice to continue, then we're robbing people. Favoritism, unfair laws, those also are a form of stealing. They basically say, I have mine, you can take a hike. But a certain Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his own beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And on the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him. Whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you. Here's the third attitude. What is mine is yours, and I'll share it. This is a proper attitude to have towards money and possessions. Our use of wealth today will have consequences tomorrow. Remember the story of the rich young ruler in Matthew 19:16? He wanted to know what he needed to do to enter into heaven. And Jesus said, obey the commandments. He said, well, which ones? And so he gave him those bottom 6, the morality commandments. And he said, well, those I have done since my youth. He said, okay. Now, go sell all your possessions and give them to the poor. And it says he went away very sad because his possessions were great. Give away your possessions. Sell your possessions and give them away to the poor. What he was telling them to do was to obey the top 4 commandments now. What's important? Because you see, his wealth was above his relationship with God. And his possessions were his idol. And they also gave him his rest. So, you could say in his defense, well, he was a good person. He obeyed the 6 commandments. But he failed the other 4. How many times have you heard people say, I'm a good person. God's not going to send me to hell. I'm a good person. Or, you know what, they're a good person. Just leave them alone. They don't have to go to church. They're a good person. God's not going to condemn them to hell. You know?
It was both right in the back. I just wanted to make sure it was still.
You only got 6 out of 4. When I was in school, that's an F grade. 6 out of 10 is an F grade. That's failing. And that's basically what happened here. He failed the test. So the proper attitude is really a 4th attitude. The attitude really should be, what I have is God's. Let's share it.
Amen.
God gives us money to use for His. Well, God gives us money and ability to use it for His glory and for His kingdom. To do any less is robbery. So, I'm sure there's some people here right now thinking, all right, so you're telling me that I have to sell everything I own and give it to the poor? No, that's not what we're saying at all. Because again, if that rich young ruler was a generous person to begin with, I don't think Jesus ever would have told him that. God was already above his money then.
Mm-hmm.
So where is God in money? Is money below God? Or is money above God? If it's in the right perspective, you're going to have a generous heart. God says, I want you to prosper as your soul prospers. He wants us to have material wealth. He wants us to have possession. Why? Because you're to use it to further His kingdom.
Amen.
If somebody comes to you with a need, and you don't even think twice about it, it's like, yes, what? I'll pay your rent. You know? You're down, I'll pay your rent. I'll pay your electric bill. I don't want your lights shut up. I'll pay it. You don't have to pay me back. Here, it's yours. This is the attitude. To say, oh, you're going to lose everything. Oh, sorry. You just robbed. You just robbed him.
Come on now.
Oh, that's a hard one to swallow, I know, but that's what it is. But he wants you to have money. He wants you to have it. I mean, if you don't believe me, just look. You can read this yourself. I'm not going to tell you the whole thing. In Matthew 25, the servant is given 5 talents, and he goes out and he doubles it. What does his master say? Wonderful! You are a good and faithful servant. Then there's the one servant that hid the talent. And what does he do? He rebukes him and casts him out and takes that 1 talent and gives it to the guy who had 5, turned it into 10, and now he gets an extra 1. Okay. If God didn't have you have 1, you'd have wealth. That's not the way the story would have read. It would have read something totally different.
Man.
So, honest work, honest investing, and prayer are all acceptable means of generating wealth. If you work hard, you invest wise, and let's face it, a lot of us have had to pray, Father, give us this day our daily bread, when we are short, when we lean on Him. These are all acceptable. But anything that even smells of deceit or fraud is not acceptable. Going into work and spending half your day on the internet, that's not acceptable ways of earning wealth. Don't steal toilet paper from your employer instead of buying it at the grocery store. Okay? That's that. Remember the picture of the lady and the butcher?
Mm-hmm.
God hates dishonest scales. Don't cheat somebody. Look around your house. Have you borrowed anything that you haven't returned? If you have, return it. And if you can't return it, replace it. Sometimes people need to see your act of faithfulness more than they need to hear about your faith. So go and tell them, it's like, I'm returning this, I'm sorry, but I'm learning about Jesus Christ in church, and I just need to make things right. So are you ready to take this stealing one step further? Let's go one step further, a little bit deeper here. And talk about the ultimate act of defrauding, the ultimate act of withholding what belongs to somebody else. And some of you probably guessed where I'm going with this. Yeah, the tithes. Withholding what is rightfully God's. God, the giver of all, the giver of life, the giver of grace, of mercy, of healing, of salvation. Malachi 3, he says, you are robbing me of the offering and the tithe that belongs to me. And then we say, but God, you don't understand. I don't have enough. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I'm not making it. My God, I even had to write an IOU for my nails this week. Throughout history, Christians have defrauded God by taking the first 10% and spending it on themselves. Lavish vacations, toys, trinkets, maybe buying a new iPhone every year. You say, but God, I can't make it. And God looks down at you and you've got that new iPhone. Do you want to be Uncle Ted to God? I don't want to be God's Uncle Ted. Where you see, in 1 Corinthians 6:10, it says, not thieves, nor the covetous. And what are covetous? People who are planning on stealing. Not drunkards, not revelers, not swindlers. What are swindlers? Swindlers, again, con men. They're the snake oil salesmen of 150 years ago. Shall inherit the kingdom of God. When Jesus was crucified, who was he crucified between? Adulterers, murderers, swindlers, thieves. But not to worry, because in the very next verse, verse 11, it goes on to say, and such were some of you, but you were washed, but you were sanctified, but you were justified in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ and in the Spirit of our God. Just like for one of those thieves, it's not too late. Paul says in Ephesians 4:28, and this is where we're going to wrap it up. He who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with his own hands, that he may have something to share with those in need. Isn't that our fourth attitude that we just talked about? There it is. Fourth attitude all over again. So stealing, thou shalt not steal. Yeah? Those four simple words create quite a sermon, don't they? Like everything else in the Ten Commandments, it's a lot more than just breezing through it verse by verse. Oh, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat. Okay, cool, great, sounds good. It's a lot more to it when you really look into it. But if there's anyone here who doesn't know this Jesus that saved the one thief on the cross, I would like to know him, just raise up your hand.